Hello, hello, good afternoon. I have a challenge for you, but before I get there, I need to step back and tell you a little bit more about me as a human. So first of all, my name is Xiomara. My X is like an S, and every syllable is important to me. My name means ready for battle, and its origins are Aztec. My name is a very important part of who I am, and I wear it with dignity. I am a proud descendant of the indigenous Taino people of the Caribbean. They were voyagers and farmers who encountered Christopher Columbus in 1492 and were subsequently starved, enslaved, poisoned until their extinction 50 years later. I am spiritually grounded by and connected to Yemaya. She is the West African and Afro-Caribbean goddess of the oceans and fertility. She is motherly and protective and has deep care and compassion for others. She does not easily lose her temper, but when angered, she can be quite destructive. I'm a daughter to a proud New Yorican mother from the South Bronx and a Muslim father. Both of my parents grew up in poverty. They were first-generation college graduates, and together, they broke the intergenerational cycle of poverty. I am Boricua, Cubana, and Indian. That means growing up, my kitchen smelled like garlic and adobo, sazon, cumin, and cardamom. My house was filled with the sounds of conga and sitar and salsa. And I watched my parents build deep, trusting, authentic relationships across every line of difference. For them, that was the definition of love. I'm a cisgender woman. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I'm a Cornell alum. I'm the founder of the Latino Living Center on campus. I'm an hermana of Latinas Promoviendo Comunidad, Lambda Pi Chi Sorority Incorporated. I'm a Teach for America alum from 1997 and a staff alum too. I taught in the vibrant South Bronx community where my mom grew up, where my grandfather lived. So every day of my work as a teacher was deeply personal. As a staff member, I founded the organization's first national talent team. I served on the management team. I'm an MBA. I spent almost a decade in the private sector at Deloitte doing human capital consulting. I am gay. I've been with my partner for 19 years. We've been illegally married for 7, legally married for 2, and I'm a mother to a smart, courageous, sassy, strong, beautiful 6-year-old first grader who's learning to read, loves Star Wars and coding. She is multi-ethnic, will be experienced by the world as white, and has 2 moms. I played classical piano for 13 years and sang in a reggae band for 7. I believe that life's most important lessons can usually be found somewhere in the lyrics of Rent or Hamilton. Oh, and I really do like purple. The point is, I am a complex and intersectional being. It all matters. It all gives me strength and energy and focus and commitment. My best power lies at the intersection of all of my identities because they all made me who I am standing in front of you today. But here's the problem. Before starting Promise54, I spent almost 20 years of my career in white dominant culture organizations where efficiency and outcomes and urgency ruled over trust and transparency and authentic relationships, where sterile definitions of professionalism reigned, where a high-risk performance mindset was the norm and perfection was the expectation. And if I wanted to succeed, to be seen and heard, to increase in access to power and resources and agency, if I wanted to be in the senior-most rooms when decisions were being made and strategies created in service of our kids, our families, and our communities, well, then I needed to pack away bigger and bigger parts of my identity in a suitcase, which I dragged around behind me every day. I built the toolkit to assimilate when I needed to cover when I had to lean exclusively on my formal credentials, the parts of me that were acknowledged as assets and would be seen and accepted in these worlds. And in the end, I succeeded in these environments. But the cost to me was huge because I was carrying around this massively heavy suitcase wherever I went. Claude Steele writes about stereotype threat. He says, when we hold an identity that's historically marginalized in society and for which a negative stereotype exists, well, then we become hyper-aware of our own behavior in relation to that stereotype. And so, for example, I became fixated with not being perceived as too pushy or too emotional of a woman. I was conscious at all times, about the volume of my voice, the pace of my speech, the rigor of my hand movements, out of an awareness of the risks of being seen as a feisty, fiery, spicy, disruptive Latina, or worse yet, an angry brown person. I let my name be shortened without my permission for the convenience of others who are looking for a way around learning to pronounce it. When asked what my name meant, usually after some proclamation about how unique it was, I would share that it was once the name of an Aztec princess. Also a fact, by the way, but so much more palatable than the true meaning ready for battle. That true meaning stayed buried deep in my suitcase. Steele says, the more we care about what we're doing, the more fixated we become on ensuring that we're not being reduced to or affirming these stereotypes. And all of this mental gymnastics is upsetting and distracting and disturbing, and it drains energy away from the task at hand. Steele calls that burden of carrying the suitcase around cognitive drain. And I desperately wanted to put the suitcase down and unpack and put back on all the parts of me. And from the field-level DEI research that we do at Promise54, we know that this desire to show up with more of me or all of me without worrying about how that will be perceived or the risks and repercussions of those perceptions is very common among folks of color in our sector. And so my team and I started to envision what a different way could be. What would it look like to put trusting and authentic relationships based in our shared humanity first? What would it look like to redefine professionalism, to let emotion and vulnerability back in? What would it look like to assume that imperfection was the norm and that we have a right to expect second, even third chances? And to do all that without wavering in our high expectations around what we can accomplish individually and collectively. What would it look like to start with an assumption about the innate brilliance of each human being and then add to that all of the richness that comes from the intersectional complexities of our identities, and then add to that the skills and the capacities? We've all begun to deprogram from white dominant culture norms and habits and heal from the pain and trauma that we've experienced previously. We call this radically human. And in our radically human world, how we do something or the process we undertake is as important as what we produce or the outcomes. We know that every single one of us is imperfect, and we regularly extend to each other the grace and generosity of second chances. Good intentions don't trump painful impact. And we get to be vulnerable and real, which allows more learning and growth and risk-taking and innovation. And qualitative life experiences get acknowledged as valid and real data that must be honored and listened to. Let me give you some raw examples of how this works. When someone makes a mistake, I get to say, it's okay, we'll fix it. We all make mistakes, I still like you, and your job is not at risk. Perfection is overrated. When I'm feeling triggered, I get to say, out loud, I experienced that as a racialized microaggression, and despite what may have been good intentions, the impact on me was pain, and we have to deal with that. And some days, I get to say no to educating others because it's in service of others, but it's on my back. And I'm not accountable for the learning or the guilt or the fragility or the tears of others. Those are not my responsibilities. So on many other days, I may support you through a rough moment anyway, just out of compassion for our shared humanity. But some days, I get to say, I'm not up to it today. And perhaps most importantly, I get to slow down, insert intentionality, planfulness, care, compassion, humor, and love back into the work. I get to unpack the suitcase and be as much of me as I want to be, bring as much of me as I am willing to generously share. We don't have it all figured out. Like all of you in your organizations, we are on our own journey. But it's starting to work. I have my energy back, and I'm doing better work than ever. So here's the challenge I want to pose to you today. If you personally were to live and work in a radically human way, what would that allow you to do and to be? What would it take for you to be able to live and work in that radically human way? And are any of those conditions within your control? And then let's think about it in an organizational context too. What would it take for you to create the conditions within your organization for radical humanity? And what would that allow your organization to do and to be? Thank you.